Good morning, everyone. So today it's Monday the 13th, and I posted a video for all of you to have access to under videos. And it's the discussion on that article, Some Could Suckle Over Their Shoulder, Male Travelers, Female Bodies, and the Gendering and of Racial Ideology 1500s to 1700s. So I understand that that became a little bit of a lengthy kind of a discussion. However, the one thing I forgot to share with you were the pictures. So, um, just to kind of get an idea of how these archives depicted uh, black bodies, and it also has like images of Native, sorry, Native American women and their bodies. Um, so keep in mind, like as we had discussed, that the bodies that the typical bodies, the white female bodies that these male travelers had gotten kind of used to seeing, were considerably different, right? And so there are images of like, I hope you can see this. They're images of cannibalism, as we had spoken about it in the video. See that? Oops. That's another image right there. You know, these are just depictions of um, these are depictions of like cannibalism because they considered these different, so-called very different people who had different lifestyles and different kind of a physique and body structures as being savages. They're beastly living, people of beastly living. That's what it says. They don't have the capacity to respect one another, right? They're in fact hunters. They hunt for each other. So these are ways of like showing savagery in these archived prints and drawings. Okay. Now this image is of a woman breastfeeding over her shoulder. Um, it's from Theodore de Bry, Small Voyages, Volume 6. Um, Note the contrast between this latter depiction and the early representations of a Native American woman. And so, let's see. Earlier depictions showed Native American women as such. We're going to just do a little contrast study as they have suggested. Wow. Oops. There you go. Right. And after they realize that these people don't speak the same language, they don't eat the same way, their lifestyles are completely different, you know, they kind of get to examine these people a little bit. And then they decide to depict them differently. So you can kind of see over here that there is a woman in the corner. She has two children with her. She's got those kind of long, sagging breasts, and one of them is kind of propped over her shoulder, or right around the shoulder, and there's a baby suckling milk, right? And she's looking into the distance at these ships. A lot of the bodies had forms of scarification, and what would be considered beauty ideals in different cultures were, you know, again, something that made them stand out as being different. We're coming to the best one. Or maybe that was the best one. uh, but you know what? The other thing I would also recommend is like looking at archived prints and archived drawings, because a lot of these are taken from uh, is it called the Library of I forget what it's called, but the Museum of Archives in, I think there's one in New York, one in Washington D.C., and they have these vast collections of them, and some of them are actually available for you to see and look at online. And I just find it very kind of interesting that when you see these ancient, like these old um, prints, you realize that even though we don't look at certain bodies the same way, right? And we may not have the same kind of association with them any longer. The aesthetics of idealism, right, are still continued from that time. And we discussed this in the previous video, that ideals, beauty ideals, and beauty standards are still ones that are, you know, preferred as to be white. And the reality is that we can sit here and discuss, how the impact has been on indigenous people and on black and on African women. Um, but this impact has also kind of spread throughout the world, and it's very prominent today. So we have eyelid surgeries in China and Korea. It's so common in certain parts. I mean, in China, it's so common. In Korea, it's very common. And one of my Korean friends was saying to me that um, on every girl's, like literally almost every girl, when she graduates from high school before going to college, she gets a gift or a present from her family, and majority of the girls nowadays ask for an eyelid surgery to kind of make the eyes larger. Similarly, in India, we have the trend of skin bleaching, and skin brightening. But the notion of like changing your skin color to look like something else, especially that of a white, population, is itself idealizing whiteness, right? We see the same trend throughout South America. We see it here. We see, hair straightening or perming. We see um, even this whole like I can be honest with you, like I go to the gym about 4 to 5 times a week, and when I started working out first, this was in 2013. I went to my trainer and she wanted to do an assessment, and the first assessment she did, she said, "You are obese," based on the BMI and all those other tests. And I literally had to tell her, according to who? According to who am I obese? Um, and she said that, well, this is what the BMI machine says. It kind of balances, kind of takes the proportion of body fat to muscle and tissue and all that. And I was like, you know what? This is not an obese body. If this is an obese body, then then something is very wrong. In fact. I also like at that point, I also started thinking about how culture, you know, plays a huge role and geography plays a huge role in your body structure, right? So you would notice that a lot of South Asians have a tendency to have a more fat accumulate in the kind of core region, um, and and there is also, of course, diet and all that stuff, But as a vegan vegetarian, being told that my body is an obese body based on the body preference of idealism of someone else, and most likely a white definition of what is an ideal body, I had to really kind of argue with my trainer, and I'm sure like this is the kind of thing that so many people go through, not just me, right? A lot of you maybe in class also struggle with some kind of an idealism of your body figure, your body weight, your aesthetics, short hair, long hair. There's all kinds of stuff that we all encounter, and at some point you have to just understand that this is an impact of not only the fashion industry, but a far more historical kind of a narrative that has come to exist and play into our society today. Okay, so we have discussed that. I also would suggest that if you get the time, you should really look up Orientalism on Google and just see what it means. And I will, of course, explain it a little bit more in the following video, that the next one for next week. Um, but I think this would be a way of understanding how colonization and imperialism, these are words you should also familiarize yourself with, colonization and imperialism, how the histories of colonial histories and imperial histories have kind of dictated certain ideologies, right? And we will go through them the following class. Now, when you're reading when you are going through the reading on Saratchi Bartman or Sarah Bartman, she is you should kind of just you should understand that this is based on a real woman. She's not fictional, you know, she did have a huge body, and this body of hers was so different from any other body that some of these white travelers had seen, that when they saw her, they literally asked her, you know, we need to study you, we need to do experiments on you. And so she was brought by a doctor to Europe. I forget if it was France or if it was England. And he kept her with him for literally a very long time. And I believe upon his passing, she was given over to, like, um, you know, a show where you show people, like, you know, some that they're different, and what we would have otherwise understood almost as a freak show, you know, but that's of course a very problematic term now, and it should have been back then as well. Um, so her body was ultimately like a spectacle for people to look at and to laugh at and to be appalled by and to be grotesqued by, you know, because it was so different. And ultimately, what happened was that when she died, and she died relatively young, they have cut pieces of her body for museum purposes, like for displaying them as artifacts. You know, so this is kind of the reality of not just the black body, but a body of a black woman who was much bigger, who was much more curvaceous, you know, and because people had not seen such a body before, her body became a spectacle for the entire civil world, right? The white world to see. It was not until very recently that the museum has, I forget which country in Africa she is from, but the authorities there asked the museum that, you know, she does not belong in pieces in your museum. Her remains of her body belong back in her home country. So, and this is very recent. This was a recent occurrence. So you can see that this history has not been that far from us. We are still tackling live artifacts, you know, from back in these days, and we're still kind of giving some form of justice to people who were brutalized and who were discriminated and who were ruthlessly beaten. This has been the history of the black body. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Hopefully your readings go well and you enjoy them. I'm going to be grading some of your the first discussion posts today. So hopefully you all will see your discussion board grades this week. If you have any questions again, feel free to call. All right, guys, I'll see you very soon. Talk to you later. Bye.